Alright guys, so I'm going to make this pretty quick as I can anyway, try to explain some of the org ranks and the fleet that we have set up at the moment and the plans if you were to join the org. Right now we just changed over a few rank names to fit more in line with the StarCraft video game if you've ever played it, but the initial rank that you get when you join the org is going to be SCV, which is like a mineral harvesting construction equipment, unit in StarCraft. Basically, any member that doesn't want to be a part of military, doesn't want to be part of war, anything like that, just wants to do things like cargo or mining or base building or anything like that, or just an affiliate, um, kind of alliancing with the org, we'll say in the SCV rankings. We'll try to produce Zeus suits or some other type of, you know, decently versatile armor for people who enter into the org. Zeus suits will be one of them probably that we want to do at the very beginning. Now, the next rank that we have is just the Marine. If you go into the Marine, then essentially you're going to be able to get the basic uniform that the Marines have, being able to use and operate the ground vehicles and things that we have for land combat, and also access to Titan suits when they come out into the game. So the Marines will basically be our armored division. Um, Basically, just think tanks, ballistas, um, you know, uh, Titan suits, and transport vehicles, things like that. The next rank that we're going to have is the Ghost. So this is going to be more of the elite kind of people who've been around a little bit. Um, they can get access and use pretty much any gear that the Marines could use, but they also will get their own specialized gear that they can choose themselves. Since we don't really have to worry about, arming 1,500 people with ghost gear, they can choose what they want. And ideally, they're going to also be able to lead some of the squads of Marines that are underneath or whoever's online. They can kind of take charge and you know, tell them what needs to be done on the ground when something's going on. And then basically after that, we have the Enforcer. These guys are going to be the basically you can kind of think of them as security, but a little bit more complicated than that. They're going to be able to fill any role of the Ghost and Marine. They're going to be able to use any equipment and stuff that they need to do the job that they need to do. But basically, they'll be on the ships. They're the guys that are going to be crewing the turret guns. They're the guys that are going to be running the medical facilities. The guys, helping doing anything that the ship needs, and also, protect them versus boarding parties, things like that. These guys are mostly going to be on the capital ships, so probably going to be on the Kraken, probably would be on the Polaris. Um, these other ships don't necessarily need enforcers, so they probably won't have them. But those two ships in particular, they'll probably be there. There might be some on the Kraken or the Carracks as well. But basically, enforcers are just going to be people that are high enough level to maintain, operate. They know how to do things, and they can do whatever they want on the end. And then the rank above that will be captains. We kept a couple from the original, org suggestions. So captains are just going to be the captains of the ships. They're going to be in charge of running and maintaining the ships, making sure everything's going good. They can do what they want with them for the most part. And we'll kind of have separate units when it comes to the overall fleet. So, for instance, the Starfarer, the two Liberators, and the Crucible, every one of those is going to have a captain, but the Crucible is going to be the primary ship in this. It's going to be, the ship that's maintaining the ground vehicles, the ship that's, probably going to be landing as the centerpiece of a mobile ground base while everything gets built up, and it'll be in charge of those ships. So in each group section, you're going to have your captains, but then you're going to have your primary ship that's in charge. For instance, the two Perseus and the Polaris would end up being in a group for like an escort, but the Polaris will be in charge of these two ships, even though they all have their own captains. And then the same would be for the Kraken. So you can have the Kraken and you can have the Carracks and stuff together, and the Kraken would be in charge. And then the overall fleet, one of these ships would be in charge. Probably the Polaris originally, because it's going to have the large radars in the future, or the capital size radars in the future. And then essentially the goal is in the game at some point this fleet will either build, capture, earn a Idris, and when the org grows big enough, we would crew the Idris, and the Polaris will become a support ship, and then the Idris would become the commanding vessel over the entire fleet. And at this point, somewhere down the road, you might try and get a second Polaris at some point. But one Polaris is fine. This gives us a lot of flexibility. Total of 11 ships. Without the Idris, though, we're looking at probably something around 60 people that we're going to need to kind of run and operate everything. And then in my original 100-person limit that I wanted for the org, that also frees up about 40 people to do ground operations to be Marines on the fleet for the most part. And then whoever you got for SCV can either tag along and help fill in roles, or they can just be supporting the org in other ways without being a part of the main fleet. And that'll be the main gist of this. So as for designs and what the fleet's potentially being set up to do, I've went back and forth. There is ways to cut the fleet down if you do need to. So easily at the beginning of the game, we could cut off a Liberator, the Crucible, Starfarer, and a Carrack, and that would give us basically 6 ships that we'd have to worry about, drastically reducing the amount of crew that we would need, but also the amount of capabilities. But if we do grow and get to that stage, we will have that option. We went back and forth on the 2 Liberators, but essentially the Liberators are going to be our ground base of operations, and it also gives us flexibility depending on what they decide to do in the future with a lot of the building construction and things like that. Having a second Liberator means that we could have one focused on base building and ground vehicles, and one that has mining equipment and mining ground vehicles and an expanse or something on top of it if we really needed to refine materials. But otherwise, it just gives us more ground vehicles and stuff to protect our main base while we're trying to build. So when everything deploys, you could deploy 10 ballistas or whatever out of these things, and then secure the area while you're starting to build your base. And then the Starfarer is going to be attached to that as simply cargo transport and fuel production, which is going to give us a quick, powerful energy supply to keep everything up and running with the ground bases. The 2 Carracks are going to be basically pairing with the Perseus for the most part. They're going to be anti-fighter screens, trying to help cover the Perseus's weakness with fighters, as well as provide support on the ground, searching out mineable resources on the ground, searching out enemy locations, things like that, and also potentially carrying medium-sized base-building ground vehicles in the front, acting as forward. Let's say the Crucible and the Liberators are the large base, the primary base. With those ships together, we'd basically just need to build a ground hospital, something with tier 1 beds for respawn and bed logging, and we'd be fairly set for the most part, and hangars. And then the um, Carracks would be more in charge of finding resources to mine with quicker base building stuff, being able to produce more refineries in the medium tier to get resources flowing, and then we can build up and expand and build bigger buildings as time goes on. So that'll be very good. And then the two Liberators, they have 16 jump seats apiece, so you're looking at 32 people, multiple um, uh, armored lockers, armories for troops on the ground to use. This will be where a lot of the Marines probably are, or SCV guys, either or. And they also have automated point defense turrets. So with two of them, you're looking at two automated point defense turrets, two manned turrets upper, and then right now the Crucible is also slated for a upper manned turret. So that gives you a good, decent bit of turret cover over your initial ground base, and then you have the Starfarer itself, which could potentially, offer another size 5, as well as, backwards rear turrets to kind of handle and maintain stuff. And then in that small group of ships, also, starting off with an Org, the Starfarer is a pretty good starting Org ship, I believe, because it offers, fuel, and it offers a lot of versatility for a organization. Now, with all of these together, though, you'll have a pretty solid, defensive area that you can put down on a planet's surface, which means that we no longer have to land the Kraken if we don't want to. We can keep the Kraken up in space along with these other ships to keep it from having to put itself at risk landing on a surface, and I am perfectly fine with that. And then you can also see that now this fleet is basing itself around 2 to 3 capital ships and not really a whole lot else. This also means that if we are able to build large buildings and large hangars on a planet's surface, we'll be able to store pretty much any of these large ships inside of those hangars, and then we can keep our capital ships in space or wherever we want, kind of away in an isolated location for first response. And as you can see in the future, the Kraken, for instance, doesn't really have PDS turrets, but we know that the Polaris has PDS turrets right now, and the Idris has PDS turrets right now. So being able to dock those two onto the Kraken itself will able to give it a very big shield from torpedoes and other kinds of fire while offline, and potentially shielding some of the other ships on board from actions, as well as giving additional hangar capacity for more fighters. Since the Polaris can hold 1, the Idris can hold 3, you already got 4 on the Kraken, plus 2 repair bays on the Kraken, plus 2 pads on the Kraken. You're going to be doing pretty well on that. And then even without the Idris in the equation, which is going to bump up our numbers quite a bit, so we're going to be wanting to push into the 150, 200 player range before we try to fully man and operate an Idris, I'm sure. The uh, the Perseus can potentially go down to a planet's surface. So you can use those for defense for the fleet, defense for the ground base, because you could probably set one on the ground and then skeleton crew it as like a artillery turret, basically protecting versus big ships coming down. All that stuff's going to be pretty good. As for kind of the layout of troops and stuff, you're looking at enforcers probably on every capital ship. That would probably be a primary concern. That's also the 3 that have carriers, so that would also be a big issue to have quite a few pilots and stuff to keep those aircraft moving. SCV or Marines would be on the Liberators for the most part. Seems like the best options to have those, and also the um, Crucible. And the ghosts and things of that nature could be on basically any ship, but ideally they're going to be crewing the Carracks, so All the ghosts with their own personal armor, their own personal armories and weapons and everything else. They will have their own carracks. So you're looking at, you know, 6 armored lockers on the carrack for each, so 12 ghosts potentially, and then you will have maybe some enforcers on the carracks for manning the turrets and stuff while the ghosts are doing what they want to do. So potentially they would be stored on those ships and you moved around as like a mobile special unit base of operations. But essentially we would just be having the enforcers crew the ship and maintain it and run medical and stuff out of it. There's also some benefits to this as well. So with the Starfarer, we're potentially going to be able to keep refueling the Kraken for a long period of time. Also, with Quantanium material, with multiple liberators, we have the ability to potentially put mining vehicles to mine Quantanium and then refine it on the Starfarer to keep our Quantanium stores high. Also, we wanted to have 2 crucibles. I would still like to have 2 crucibles, but in this fleet design, if something is getting through to your crucible and destroying it, then that's good game for them. They managed to hit you where it hurts, and hopefully it's completely disabled. But any other ship, it should be able to somewhat repair and bring them back into operations. We'll look at potentially trying to get a second Crucible at some point, but as far as I'm concerned in the game, we're going to need a lot more, people and all that, and have everything else crewed first, and then we can worry about getting a second Crucible. Same thing goes with the Starfarer. I mean, yeah, you could bring more Starfarers, but we really just need that base functionality here. And when it really comes down to it, a lot of times I think you need to be able to reduce your fleet down to the bare minimum if you need to. And the bare minimum in this case for like a long-term deployment would probably be Polaris, 2 Perseus, Kraken, Liberator, Carrack, and the Starfarer. That would give you pretty much a good amount of fuel, um, jump point mapping, and a little bit of fighter support, so you can operate this fleet pretty small. But then as things expand, just being able to land and have more ground security, because that would be the main weak point of the first design, is that you would put a Liberator on the ground, and then it has 1 PDS turret and 1 upper turret, and you don't really have a whole lot of defense for it as you're trying to operate. And if your guys, probably want to stay busy and doing stuff around the planet's surface, um, you're probably not going to want to sit around all the time, so you can't guarantee that you're always going to have people ready to defend your ground base as it's getting built up. So I think that's probably the most vital part, is just having those there. But all in all, I feel like this is a pretty solid fleet design. Um, a lot of flexibility, a lot of cargo capacity as well. Then we also have, just the base standard. Like if you wanted to build up into this fleet starting the game, essentially you just earn up to a Starfarer, and then the Starfarer would be able to fuel any of your regular small ships that you would have, so you wouldn't have to go for fuel as often. If you had like Connies or anything like that, you could have mining vehicles and stuff and dump Quantanium material or whatever else, just to keep all your fleet running. And then getting a Crucible as a secondary would be good just to keep everything repaired. So Crucible and Starfarer pairing together is just a really solid all around like set of ships, I would assume, because gas and repairing is what your ships need for the most part. And then you just need a source of materials to keep things repaired. But the Liberators, you're also looking at very flexible platforms that can pair with most things very well. Don't require a lot of crew, has a lot of capabilities, and able to hold a lot of cargo as well. But just looking at this base thing, cut out the Polaris, the Perseus, the Idris, all of that, and we just go to sort of the core ships here. You got like 400 and something SCU on each Carrack. All right, so you're already looking at that. You got like 200 and something on Starfarer, so you got like 1,000 there. You got like 400 on each Liberator, and then another 200 and something on the Crucible, so you got another 1,000 there. And then you got, 3,700 on the Kraken itself. So you're looking at 5,000, 6,000 SCU in those ships, and then you have your Polaris and all those other ships would just be carrying probably a lot of munitions, a lot of ammunition. The Idris in particular would probably be carrying most of the spare ammunition for those ships, if it ever came down to it in the future. And then the Polaris would probably have some. So you're still looking at like 6,000 SCU of cargo capacity, and it's not even counting like all of the extra ships that you could be carrying on top of these. You could have a bunch of cutlasses, you could have a bunch of Connies, whatever else, and that's quite a lot of storage capacity to keep an operation going. And if you're able to mine on the planet's surface or anything like that, transport goods up to the ships, everything else, and keep your stuff from getting robbed, that's probably going to be a pretty hefty payday. And then as you look at this, you kind of have um, even in the base fleet, you have the size 8 turrets and size 6 turrets on the Kraken, which still is going to be a decent amount of firepower to deal some damage to some big ships. It's also not as armored, so it's probably going to be a little bit faster than we might expect. Hopefully, because I really don't trust Drake and its armor capabilities when it comes to combat, especially against an Idris. I think an Idris is going to be the Kraken's biggest bane of an, is it like as soon as you take a rail cannon shot, it's probably going to be done. So hopefully it can maneuver somewhat. But you're going to have the size 8 guns and size 6 guns or whatever that's on the Kraken. You have the size 7 guns on the Perseus. You have the size 6 guns on the Polaris. That's a lot of capability to take on a bigger ship like an Idris, and hopefully enough to actually win and disable an Idris and then repair it with a Crucible and just take one in game. That also kind of helps us recoup quite a lot. And if we can capture an Idris in game, that gives us a lot more flexibility when it comes to the org fleet. Um, and then when we're looking at like fighter coverage, you've got two PDS turrets on each Perseus. That's why they're kind of hanging at the back, towards the back end of the Kraken, because the Kraken's engines are probably going to be a very vulnerable target, especially against things like a Perseus. And then we'll keep a or against a Polaris or Perseus either way. And then the Polaris probably, until we get an Idris, needs to be kind of in the front of the fleet, scanning with its radar, checking for things. But even when it comes to anti-fighter defense here, you have all of the turrets that are on the Kraken, so it's basically like a bigger hammerhead. Is kind of how I'm looking at it a little bit. And then we have the two Carracks, and then you have that center mass. So you already have, one PDS turret on each Liberator and two PDS turrets on each Polaris, and then PDS turrets on the Polaris as well. So a lot of potential anti-torpedo, anti-missile defense. We got a lot of anti-fighter defense, and we got the ability to at least take on probably an Idris in a fight. And realistically, when it comes to a fleet like this, um, all we really need to do is get the ground units set up. So if we run into a fleet and they're not prepared to fight us, then potentially you could just push through, land all of your large vehicles on the ground, and then take your Kraken and your Polaris and just kind of take off. Maybe you have your Perseus go with them, and then you'd have a fairly capable ground force just hiding out, just kind of maintaining itself on a planet's surface. And they'd have medical beds, repair facilities, storage capability, base building capability, gas production, um, you know, and then you just protect your Kraken. So hopefully this does kind of give a little bit of an explanation of what we're kind of doing. It's going to be ground-based attack, um, fleet defense, things like that. Support when it comes to newer players that come to the game. A big focus on repair and refuel. A big focus on, transportation. The fleet's very versatile, I think, for the most part, to fit in with most roles. We're going to be able to provide defense for any kind of, mining operation or any kind of salvage operation, any sort of industrial thing that people want to do. Also, potentially able to use our ships to just mine and stuff ourselves to make some money, especially at the beginning of the game. Going to be able to help people move from one planet to another in more of a safe manner if more merchant type ships wanted to travel with us. But also, if smaller people, um, smaller orgs with, a few ships needed transportation to certain areas, you could reconfigure this fleet to carry quite a lot for them. We don't necessarily have to set up a ground base on a planet. We could easily carry someone's mining operation over here with us. In that case, we would get rid of our transportation vehicles for infantry. You put on some fighters on the Kraken, just swarm the fighter deck, put their mining vehicles and stuff up there, put some mining vehicles and stuff on the Liberators, and then just kind of mosey on over to where they need to go, drop them off, take the payment, and then maybe they want us to pick up supplies and run it for them afterwards. But also being able to just stay around and provide repair and refuel capabilities is a pretty versatile thing to have, as well as defense. So I feel like the fleet is pretty well rounded, and hopefully it's going to be able to have anyone that comes to the org be able to work their way up, fly or become a captain of one of these ships if you want, make some money and then earn your own big ship, because this is really kind of the end game when it comes to here. And once we're able to capture one Idris, potentially we could just keep capturing more and more Idrises would be kind of ideal. And, if players want to work their way up to an Idris, take it and fly off, I mean, we'll go and capture another Idris, you know? Or if they want to get like a javelin or anything like that and fuel it and get people for it, I'm all for it. But, uh, you know, hopefully people have goals in the game and they can expand off of this, because any direction in the game that you want to go, this fleet can be a good centerpiece for that. So a lot of the ships that I would like to have just as an org, I can't afford to man or crew. So hopefully other people would be able to provide us assistance in that, things with like the Endeavor, medical first aid and things like that, because we don't have tier one med beds. So we're going to need people to transport injured people to do tier one med beds. We're going to need, salvage operators and stuff so we can go and transport cargo and stuff from them, provide defense for them. We're going to need mining and refining capabilities. We're going to need people that want to build bases on grounds. We're going to need FPS players. We're going to need, transport players. We're going to need, pretty much every part of the game is something that can add on to and amplify the abilities of this fleet, but also something that this fleet can help provide support to in general, I believe. And hopefully that gives you some idea. If y'all do have an interest in joining, though, look on Spectrum, the STARCRAFT, TERRACRAFT is the tag, and just apply on there, and we'll look at you and get you in. We have a Discord and stuff that's getting set up. It's still not, all the way perfect, but it is fairly all right. And a couple of the guys that are helping set everything up are going to school right now, so if you don't get a reply instantly, just, you know, we'll get around to you. And y'all guys have